Ancient Persia and ancient Rome are often called two of the greatest empires in history. But they became powerful in very different worlds. One built the first true global empire. The other perfected military control and long-term rule. Today, we're not judging them by modern standards or picking sides. We're asking one simple question. How strong was each empire relative to its own time? Let's break it down. So why even compare ancient Persia and ancient Rome? Because even though they ruled in different centuries, both empires reached the absolute top level of power that was possible in their time. Ancient Persia peaked earlier, mainly between from 550 to 330 before the Common Era, when much of the world was still divided into small kingdoms. Rome peaked later, around from 100 before the Common Era to 200 of the Common Era, in a world that already had more organized states and constant competition. In simple terms, Persia became powerful when empire itself was still a new idea. Rome became powerful after centuries of political and military evolution. That's what makes this comparison interesting. Each empire wasn't just strong, they were the best examples of power in their own era. So instead of asking who was better, we're asking, how well did each empire dominate the world it lived in? Number 1. Geopolitical power. Let's talk about global influence, meaning how much of the known world each empire controlled, and how clearly their power was felt. Ancient Persia. A perfect moment to understand Persian power is around 500, before the Common Era, during the reign of Darius the Great. At this point, Persia controlled territory from the Indus Valley in the east to Egypt and the Aegean Sea in the west. This was the largest empire in human history up to that time. Darius didn't just rule by force. He divided the empire into regions, built the royal road, and made it possible to send messages across thousands of kilometers in days, not months. In this moment, Persia wasn't just influential. It was the world's main political system. Almost every major civilization had to deal with Persian power in some way. Ancient Rome. For Rome, a key moment is around 117 of the Common Era, during the reign of Emperor Trajan. This was when Rome reached its maximum territorial extent. The empire controlled nearly the entire Mediterranean coastline, linking Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East into one system. Trade flowed freely. Roman law applied across continents, and Roman roads connected cities thousands of kilometers apart. At this point, if you lived anywhere around the Mediterranean, Rome shaped your economy, security, and daily life. Scores. Ancient Persia. 9.5 out of 10, a clear global superpower at a time when no rival matched its scale. Ancient Rome. 9 out of 10, slightly less spread out, but deeply influential and long-lasting. These moments show how each empire, in its own era, reached the peak of global power possible at the time. Number 2. Military strength. Let's start with ancient Persia. At its peak, Persia could raise massive armies from across its empire. These forces included infantry, cavalry, archers, and elite units like the Immortals, who were always kept at full strength. Persia was especially strong at logistics. It could move armies across huge distances, supply them, and keep control over vast territories. A key moment to understand Persian military power is the Battle of Marathon in 490, before the Common Era. Even though Persia lost this battle, the important detail is that it could launch a major expedition thousands of kilometers from its core lands, something very few states could do at the time. Persia's weakness was consistency. Because its army was made up of many different peoples, training and discipline varied from unit to unit. Now let's look at ancient Rome. Rome's military strength came from discipline and structure. Roman legions were professionally trained, standardized, and constantly drilled. A perfect example is the Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE, where Julius Caesar defeated a much larger Gallic force through engineering, organization, and planning. Roman soldiers built forts, roads, and siege works as part of warfare. This allowed Rome to fight long wars and adapt to different enemies. Rome didn't always win every battle, but it was incredibly good at learning from defeats and coming back stronger. Scores for military strength. Ancient Persia. 8.5 out of 10. Massive armies and strong logistics, but less battlefield consistency. Ancient Rome. 9.5 out of 10, highly disciplined legions and unmatched long-term military effectiveness. Both empires were military giants of their time, but Rome's system gave it a slight edge in sustained warfare. Number 3. Wealth and economic capacity. Now let's look at wealth and economic capacity. Basically, how rich each empire was and how well it could support its power. We'll start with ancient Persia. Persia controlled some of the richest regions in the ancient world, including Mesopotamia, Egypt, Anatolia, and parts of India. These areas produced huge amounts of grain, silver, and trade goods. A key moment to understand Persian wealth is during the reign of Darius the Great, when the empire introduced a standardized tax system. Each region paid taxes based on its ability, not a fixed amount. This gave Persia a stable and predictable income, allowing it to fund large armies, build roads, and support major cities without damaging the economy. Persia's economy was efficient, organized, and relatively balanced for its time. Now let's look at ancient Rome. Rome's economy was massive and highly active. It relied on agriculture, trade, mining, and taxes from its provinces. A good moment to see Rome's economic power is during the Pax Romana, roughly the first 2 centuries of the Roman Empire. During this period, trade expanded, cities grew, and wealth flowed across the empire. Rome built ports, roads, and marketplaces everywhere. However, Rome's economy depended heavily on constant expansion and military success. When expansion slowed, economic pressure increased, but at its peak, Rome had enormous economic capacity. Scores. Ancient Persia, 9.5 out of 10. Stable, well-managed wealth across a vast empire. Ancient Rome, 9 out of 10. Larger and more complex economy, but more dependent on expansion. Both empires were economic powerhouses, each reaching near maximum wealth for their time. Number 4. Inflation. In simple terms, how stable money and prices were in each empire during their peak. In ancient Persia, mainly during the time of Darius the Great, Persia had a relatively stable monetary system for its era. Darius introduced standardized gold and silver coins and combined this with a clear tax system. Because taxes were predictable and government spending was controlled, Persia avoided major long-term inflation. Prices didn't suddenly explode, and the value of money stayed fairly consistent over time. For the ancient world, this level of financial stability was very rare. Now let's look at ancient Rome. In the early Roman Empire, especially during the Pax Romana, Rome also had stable currency and prices. Trade was strong, and confidence in Roman money was high. But over time, Rome faced rising military and administrative costs. To pay for this, Roman leaders began reducing the silver content in coins. This led to inflation, especially in later centuries. Prices increased, and trust in currency slowly weakened. So while Rome started strong, inflation became a growing problem as the empire aged. Scores. Ancient Persia, 9 out of 10. Strong monetary stability and controlled inflation. Ancient Rome, 7.5 out of 10. Stable early on, but increasing inflation over time. Number 5. Technology level. Persia's technological strength was focused on large-scale organization and infrastructure. The empire invested heavily in roads, canals, irrigation systems, and planned construction. Persia built long-distance road networks that allowed fast communication across thousands of kilometers. It developed irrigation and water control systems to support agriculture in both dry and flood-prone regions. Persian architecture, especially at sites like Persepolis, shows advanced planning, skilled craftsmanship, and coordinated labor. Just as important, Persia used administrative technology, record-keeping, standardized systems, and regional governance to manage an enormous and diverse empire efficiently. Now let's look at ancient Rome. Rome's technological focus was applied engineering and urban functionality. The empire developed durable construction methods, extensive road networks, and large-scale water systems. Roman engineers built aqueducts to supply cities with fresh water, constructed bridges and roads for military movement, and designed cities with sewers, baths, and public buildings. Rome's technology aimed to make cities operate smoothly and reliably for large populations over long periods of time. Final technology scores. Ancient Persia, 9 out of 10 advanced systems engineering, environmental control, and imperial scale infrastructure. Ancient Rome, 9.5 out of 10 exceptional applied engineering, construction materials, and urban durability. Final average scores. Now let's bring everything together. Starting with ancient Persia. Persia scores extremely high because it controlled some of the richest regions of the ancient world, including Mesopotamia, Egypt, Anatolia, and major trade routes linking east and west. This wealth wasn't just accumulated, it was managed through structured taxation, standardized systems, and long-term economic stability. When we average everything out, ancient Persia earns a final average score of 9.1 out of 10. This reflects an empire that mastered scale, wealth, administration, and stability earlier than any major power before it. Now let's look at ancient Rome. Rome's strength came from military efficiency, engineering, and long-term control. Its economy was massive, its armies were disciplined, and its infrastructure supported millions of people across continents. However, as the empire aged, economic stability became harder to maintain, especially due to inflation and rising costs. When all categories are averaged, ancient Rome earns a final average score of 8.9 out of 10. This represents an empire that perfected warfare, construction, and governance, even if long-term economic pressure slightly reduced its overall balance. So in the end, this comparison isn't about deciding which empire was better. Ancient Persia represents the birth of the global empire, showing how wealth, administration, and environmental control could hold the ancient world together. Ancient Rome represents the refinement of empire, turning discipline, engineering, and law into long-lasting power. This was ancient Persia and ancient Rome. What empire or historical era would you like to see next? Let me know in comment section.